Well, greetings, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. My next guest is Marguerite Rigoglioso. She is the founder of the Seven Sisters Mystery School, and she holds a PhD from the California Institute of Integral Studies. In addition to multiple academic papers that she's published, she has also published a few books. These books include The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, and Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, and her latest in the book that we discussed today, The Secret Life of Mother Mary. Now, I found this book and this conversation to be very interesting, very compelling, very thought provoking. I'm excited to share it with all of you. Over the course of this conversation, we touch upon all sorts of interesting topics, such as the Infancy Gospel of James, which was a text I had never heard about. I was very excited to discover this because I love those old biblical era texts. I just love that whole time of history. I just find it fascinating. We also touch a little bit upon theurgy, a little bit upon a Hindu saint named Sri Kaleshwar, who had some very interesting personal divine revelations about the biblical story. But mostly we touch upon what's at the core of Marguerite's book. And what's at the core of the book is the idea that there were ancient groups of people, primarily women, who practiced divine conception and divine birth as a spiritual technology. Very fascinating idea that is sure to challenge a lot of people's conceptions of history. But that's what we're here for, right? We're here to explore this world, to explore this strange reality, to explore whatever this thing is that we call life, whatever this thing is that we call God, whatever this thing is that we call ourselves. That's what we're here for, right? Well, to those means, or to those ends, I should say, I've read few books that I found as useful for throwing some fuel on that philosophical fire than The Secret Life of Mother Mary. I think this is a very interesting book, and I think it's a very interesting conversation that I'm excited to share with all of you. I would love to hear everybody's thoughts after they have heard this conversation, or respectful thoughts I would prefer, but any thoughts at all are appreciated. What do you think about this research? What do you think about these ideas? How could you incorporate this into your own life, or do you not think it's worth being incorporated? I really am interested to hear all of those things, and I would love to see your thoughts in the comments below the video. But for now, I'm going to shut my pie hole and allow this conversation to get rolling. And so with that, here is my interview with Marguerite Rigoglioso on her latest book, The Secret Life of Mother Mary. Peace out, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. All right, Marguerite, thank you very much for taking the time to talk today. Today we're going to be talking about your book, The Secret Life of Mother Mary. But this is hardly your first rodeo. You've written about this subject and you've researched this subject. It seems to me like it's your life's work, basically. And maybe I'm wrong about it, but that's how it seems to me. In a moment, I'm going to ask a little bit more about your personal background to give viewers an idea. But first, could you kind of encapsulate the thesis of the book and the general spirit of the book?
Yeah, so this has been in development for, 2 decades, essentially. I have a specialty in divine birth. And so my first 2 books were academic books about the reality of divine birth, particularly in ancient Greece. Prior to this Secret Life of Mother Mary, the most recent book was 3 years ago, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception. And it's about Mary and the lineage of virgin births. So I kind of laid out how she was a lineage holder of the divine birth practice. And that's how we understand how Jesus could have been born in this so-called miraculous way, right? So I looked at her early life, her birth, her early life, and up to the birth of Jesus. In this book, The Secret Life of Mother Mary, it's more fully about who Mother Mary is. How did she gain some of those womb powers that allowed for her to have a divine conception? And then importantly, what happened after her pregnancy, during the life of Jesus, during the crucifixion and the resurrection, and afterward, and how she was really a master yogic practitioner. I mean, she was the highest holy being who walked the planet. She had really developed herself. She was a healer. She was a mentor, a spiritual mentor to people. And she was the leader of the early movement around her and Jesus' teachings. She was connected with Mary Magdalene. She was her mentor. So it really looks at Mother Mary as much more than this docile, eyes to the ground, passive vehicle. And it looks to her as a master, as what is known in the Hindu tradition as a Bhairavi Mata, a very high, holy, accomplished adept, who then achieved the ultimate for many spiritual people, which is to experience what's called her ascension or her apotheosis, her going into full connection, full unity with the Divine Mother. And from there, that's how she operates and how she's accessible to us today. And it
Thank you.
also it
Oh, I'm
also
sorry.
includes,
You still got more?
yeah, it also includes some of my personal story, connecting with her, and then methods by which people can connect with her through free meditations that I offer that people can access.
Right, and that's an interesting thing about the book. It's not only, and this is actually a question that comes later. It's not only theoretical; it's also kind of like an initiatory handbook of sorts, which I found very interesting. This question was actually supposed to come later, but you mentioned her piety, and you come back to this book, or you come back to this kind of frequently in the book, about how you perceive the piety as kind of being like, let me say it this way. There's kind of two branches for how to look at spirituality in general. This obviously, these are big components, but you have kind of like the traditional mindset, which is, or traditional paradigm, which is that like the goal of spirituality is to subjugate our will to the divine, right? And that is why piety is held up as this you dissolve the ego, you accept the will of God, and you put yourself in the background. And then there's the other branch, which I think of more as like the Gnostic branch. And I find the two contrasts are so fascinating to me. And the Gnostic branch is more, without going into detail about it, it's more about like our individual will to create our own spiritual power and to elevate ourselves to transcend these things. And so one thing I kept coming back to in the book, and I apologize if I just couldn't find it in the book, but I was really intrigued to know, how do you generally perceive this? Again, from these two large categories, I understand that there's kind of an issue with making it that broad. But
Yeah.
how do you perceive humanity's relationship with God? And I'll leave it at that. Quick
Yeah.
blab.
Well, it's encoded in how I describe Mother Mary, and I continually indicate that this is relevant to us. She was not the passive vehicle victim, almost in a way, of this happenstance of divine birth that happened to her. She was a willful, sovereign practitioner every step of the way. And her will was a very important part of getting this thing going, bringing Jesus to the planet, and then continuing on his teachings of love and spiritual freedom and so forth. So I really see her practice and then what is open to all of us as very much a weave of will and flow with the universe, with the divine. Yes, there's always a bigger picture than we have. We always want to check and make sure that our will is in alignment with greater divine will. But will is important, I think. And this is what's gone missing in a lot of the traditional religions as a control mechanism for over people. And so in restoring Mary's will, essentially, this book restores Mary's will. It restores our will, and it asks and invites us to look at how to use that will, in right relationship.
Yeah, that's I don't want to dwell too much on it because it's only one part of the book, but it's a something that I think about a lot. Just our general, like, what is this God thing? What is humanity? And how do these things relate? So while I read your book, my thoughts kept going back to that. But
Yeah.
so then we'll get back into the material of the book, but this is not only a scholarly thing for you. This is a very personal thing for you. So could you go in a little bit, like you have a dramatic health event that you talk about in the book. But then really this goes all the way back to your childhood. So
Yeah.
could you just talk a little bit about like the life that brought you here?
Yes, a lot of those details are in the book, but I'll give the basic outline, which is that when I was 10 years old, my mother died of lupus. And that was a big initiation into the death realm and into the, what's beyond the body questions, right? Essentially, the questions of the divine realms. And so I didn't know it at the time, but the pain of that experience is what led me onto the healing path. And that's what led me more deeply onto the spiritual path. I was brought up Catholic, and I always kind of had a mystical bent, but it wasn't very satisfying to sit in church and hear these dead homilies. And right, Mary Magdalene's appearance at Easter perked my interest like it has many people, right? And so now there's this whole awakening to Mary Magdalene that's been happening over the past 40 years. But I think I had, I think I came into this life with an in unquenchable thirst for knowledge and for connection with the divine and for the bridging of the dimensions, our third dimension with, the dimensions beyond or within, however you want to look at it. And so that was an underpinning of all of my school time and, everything that I was doing. And finally, I started getting introduced to material, or really seeking out material that introduced me to the sacred feminine, the feminine face of God, when I was in my 30s. And then I really took off with that. I went to grad school at the California Institute of Integral Studies to really get serious about that and be a major investigator and, as it turns out, voice for the Divine Mother, for the sacred feminine. And of course, I have explored many, many goddesses and had many sojourns and times in my life where I was more focused on one than another, or receiving the medicine of, one more than another in different pantheons. And Mother Mary was shown to me fairly early on, right around the time I had that awakening to the sacred feminine, that there was a sacred feminine and that many of our ancestors had venerated her, and many peoples around the world still do, in her 10,000, faces. Mother Mary was there, and I was shown that she is essentially the goddess of the West. And so that was very intriguing to me because it allowed me to unite my upbringing with this whole goddess awakening that I was having. So I started exploring and going much more into Mother Mary, kind of on the research level, but it became more and more personal as I was doing the healing of my, emotional heart from all of that loss and subsequent trauma that I don't go into that too much in the book. But
Right.
then there were some events in more recent years that brought me down into my womb. And that's what I talk about in the book. So I'll leave that as a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Right.
Readers,
Yeah.
but it was
Oh,
clear
sorry.
that these approaches and methods that I have learned were Mother Mary's were very helpful to me in that crisis that I had.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something I find very interesting about the book is that it works in two different directions because it's a personal story and an academic story.
Yeah.
But I just totally lost my train of thought because you said something that made me want to ask a question that wasn't something that I had. Oh no, okay. So you discuss, like you just mentioned it briefly now, but in the book you discuss how you can see through the historical record how like veneration for certain Greek goddesses kind of morphed into veneration for Mary. And I'm curious, do you primarily perceive Mary as a singular human being who had access to these ancient spiritual technologies, or was she like an avatar, like an embodiment of this archetypal feminine energy that reoccurs in various guises throughout history? Like, which of those would you say is most accurate to how you see it?
Very astute question. Both. She is an avatar of a divine stream of energy. And I've been receiving that more and more and more as I've been working in my own oracle states, because through various meditation techniques and sacred medicines over the past couple of decades, I've opened to receive information from, the realms.
Mm-hmm.
And the most recent thing was shown to me just a couple of weeks ago as this book was being launched, that she is part of this stream, and we could call it the priestesshood of the Marys, the priestesshood of the Magdalens, which is part of a larger stream, which is really divine Sophia, which is part of a larger stream, which is what we could really call Mother Divine. So in that grand unity, you are both tapped into the whole, the hive, but you also have your individualized, unique personality structure. And that's what's going on. And that goes for all of us. We are all that.
Mm.
And so Mother Mary is just a particularly vivid exemplar of how that works. But so when you access her, because of all of the processes and practices she did and the final ascension that she achieved to fully unify with the Great Mother, she is our conduit to that. She is a version of Divine Mother that we can go to for healing, for spiritual mentorship and awakening and so forth. And she carries that valence of the personality that we know of her as Mary, which is why I wanted to bring more of her personality forth in this book, because we see so little of it in traditional religion. There's actually even more in the Quran about her than there is in the New Testament. So I felt that it was very important for us to see these other angles and facets of this particular personality avatar that we know of as Mary, because in that way we are developing our own self in deeper and broader ways. It's like by being able to see her in higher ways, we become higher. That's a great mystery that's encoded there. And I talk about how the Gospel of Philip talks about that.
Yeah, you don't use the word theurgy, but it sounds very much like a theurgic process or a theurgic operation.
Yes,
Um, yeah, it's interesting too. Without getting sidetracked, because theurgy was actually like discussed in the ancient Catholic Church, and now it would be considered like a heresy. I
yeah,
would assume I shouldn't. I would assume most modern Catholics would think it was like heretical weird stuff, but it was actually discussed among a lot of ancient Catholics about being able to embody these divine energies.
absolutely. That's what it's all about. It's not even about being able to embody the divine energies, but to awaken them within, like they're
Right.
already here. That's what I've been realizing lately. It's not even about putting on a cloak or becoming something you're not. It's just accessing your divine original template, DNA, if you will, right? So it's from the inside out. It's an inside job. And that's what the book is geared toward, illuminating Mother Mary so that we can illuminate what's within ourselves. And we need help along the way because we still need that healing. We still need the concepts. We still need the tools. And so all of that is discussed in this book.
Right. And to give people a general idea of what they could find in there, it's very interesting because you take the concept of the physical womb and I'm not saying your research, like this ancient practice, takes the concept of the physical womb and makes it more like like a archetypal spiritual kind of dynamic force.
That's
Um,
right.
which is really interesting because I mean that's when you read like Kabbalah and stuff, it kind of discusses this kind of these physical manifestations, but there's like deeper levels of energy within them. But anyway, so could you
Well,
just
that's
a
a
little
really,
bit to whet people's appetite about what that womb energy is?
yes. I mean, that's a really great description. That the womb is like, this living energy field within the body that is also accessible to men. So women have the physical structure, but everyone has what's called the Nada Bindu point, which is a power point, a portal entry point, an inch and a half below your navel or so. It's a floating point that is really the entry and exit point of the womb power energies, according to Sri Kaleshwar, the late Hindu saint who left this earth plane at 36 years old in 2012, but left us with this whole body of the Holy Womb Chakra system teachings, as well as others that he collected from ancient sources that were written on palm leaves. And so that I have a whole chapter devoted to what Sri Kaleshwar says about the Holy Womb Chakra, particularly as how Mother Mary worked with it and how all of us can work with it at whatever our sex, because men, again, have that Nada Bindu point, and they can access also the womb through the pure love of a woman, a soulmate, and your mother. So it's really a democratically, open to everyone kind of energy stream. Nobody's left out. But in the woman in particular, she has a particular high intensity of it because of her physical structure and her energetic structure. And so there are many, basically the system there is a system of mantras, which are sacred chants, each syllable of which is connected to an angelic force, you see. So when you're saying these mantras externally or internally, you are like playing a xylophone and calling in certain angelic energies to you, and you're developing these processes within you. Sri Kaleshwar says that's what Mother Mary did. That's what Jesus did. That's what Mary Magdalene did, as well as many other masters and saints throughout time. These teachings are at least 7,000 years old. They go back to the rishis, the Sapta rishis, the 7 rishis of our realm, of our world, according to Hindu tradition, who were also connected with the 7 sisters of the Pleiades. And all of this information eventually goes back to what Kaleshwar calls Mother Divine, right? So it's intellectual, it's philosophical, and it's very, very practical. It has a practice associated, and it has real results, some of which I talk about my own experiences in this book, and which I've observed in my clients, because I am certified to teach the Holy Womb Chakra system. And I mentioned that in the book if people want to get into it. And so I've seen, the positive effects in people's lives. And also, of my final comment on this is that Sri Kaleshwar shared with us that as part of that system, there are 2 mantras that will allow you to conceive a divine child. And one mantra is to be done during sexual union. When the woman does become pregnant, then she follows up with a second mantra on her own. And both of these are designed to clear and cleanse the field, the conception field and the child's field of any negativity, and draw in the power of Shakti, the power of Great Mother. So even divine conception is a democratic process available to all of us, whether we are capable of, because of vibration, bringing in an avatar such as a Christ. Well, we're getting there, but at least it allows us to bring in higher consciousness children from the get-go, not just being at the behest of whatever soul, kind of grabs us, right? And that is a way that we're going to raise the intelligence and raise the consciousness of the planet as well through divine conceptions. So that's another part of this book that's very exciting, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, it's interesting because Gurdjieff, the great, I assume G.I. Gurdjieff, he didn't talk specifically about the exact approach you're talking about, but he was very adamant that everything that is involved at the moment of conception is energetically kind of sets the tone for what will happen with the child. And I always found that a very interesting concept, and it really kind of raises the level of responsibility of going into creating a child. But anyway, so you touched on something I want to expand on real quick. So, and also I want to say something I really admire about your book is you are very clear and you talk very plainly about this is the scholarship. These are my own kind of like personal revelatory insights into these things. And I think that's important because there's too many people on the scene today that will look at things and present it as though it's like solid historical truth, or not truth. That it's like this comes from all directions, not only the occult, esoteric, outsider spirituality, but maybe especially from the mainstream spiritual people who they try to act like these historical things are so zipped tight, and they're not. And I really admire and appreciate the fact that you're very clear where you say, hey, this is what the books say. This is what was revealed to me. This is what I think. I think that's a noble thing. But so you just, when we're talking about this, creating this divine birth where women can have these divine conceptions, you touched upon it lightly, but for people who, I don't want them to be scared away from the book. You're not saying that everybody's just going to automatically create these messianic, like Jesus figures. You're saying, like, because you mentioned in there that you know a couple people who have actually achieved this, and
Yes.
they didn't create like a messianic figure. It's just
Right.
a more elevated, a more conscious, maybe more moral figure. Um,
Yes.
am I getting that right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And, really good point about the academia, textual, where the information is coming from, that's a whole discussion about epistemology and
Mhm.
ontology and all that. All right. So, um, okay. So there's a few things. I have a few stories. I have one story about a child who was born in the way from the two mantra process, right? Very short story. This comes from my teacher of the Holy Womb Chakra teaching, Cindy Lindsay, who's a senior teacher in the Sri Kaleshwar lineage, which is really a Shirdi Sai Baba lineage. Sri Kaleshwar named Shirdi Sai Baba as his guru. All right. And there is a Divine Mother Center in Laytonville, California that holds these teachings, and another one in Penaconda, India. Active, small. Anyway, Cindy told us the story of this boy who was born by the parents engaging in this mantra during sexual union. And once she was pregnant, she engaged in the other mantra, part of the system that I teach and she teaches. Well, this boy, for example, there was this bully in school, and the child is 5 years old, right? And this bully is just incorrigible. And so, and I'm going to have to ask Cindy again what the details were, but this boy approached this bully in such a way that it just disarmed the whole thing.
Mhm.
Everybody became calm. The teacher could not even control this boy. And it shifted the whole energy. That's an example. That's not a messianic figure. That is just a higher vibrational child who's come in,
Right.
to help out and not get caught in these combat energies, which is what the negative forces want us to do, right? And shifted the whole landscape of this classroom and was a grave lesson for these children, right? About how to actually handle conflict and when people are troubled and, this kind of thing. So that's just one example. Now, on the other level, I've known of several women who claim to have conceived in non-ordinary fashion. Now, only one of them I know that the child survived, and this is Divine Amma in India and her Swami husband. It is not Amma Chi, not the hugging saint, a different Divine Amma. Okay. Her daughter is now in her 20s, if not 30s. And I don't know much about the daughter, but she says that she conceived while her husband was away through her third eye.
Mhm.
Because, the Indian people, they know how to do all of that kinds of stuff. All right. So that's one story. But the other two that I know of, the children did not survive. The one woman, the girl died when she was 3 months old. And the other woman, the boy died. He choked right in front of her on a grape when he was 3 years old.
Ouch.
But she continued to receive information from this child on the other side about how he had to come, then he had to go. The world wasn't right for it, but he was giving her all this esoteric information. You know what I mean? So these mystical things that happen for people. For all I know, there could be more than these examples. I know there are women who have been trying and working with these technologies. And, there could be an unbroken lineage of divine birth. I don't know. I have not been approached by anybody about that. It would be miraculously wonderful if there was an underground happening that, wasn't satanic, because this technology has been co-opted. And we start hearing about that even in the ancient Greek stories.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I don't recall reading that in this book.
No, it's mainly in the mystery tradition of miraculous conception book that I wrote. Okay. But it starts out you can start seeing signs of it in the Greek tradition. You see signs of it in the royal lines of today and yesteryear. You see signs of the transition from a legitimate divine birth into hijacked divine birth during the time of King Arthur. All those beings had divine birth stories, but
you did have one sentence about that in the book. You did mention that.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
But it's being tampered with. Okay, it was yes, I do have it in this book. I didn't want to get too far off, but you know, the royal lines have been hijacked. They were originally supposed to have divine births that were bringing in avatars, serving the people, and then the avatar would bring his DNA seed outward to humanity to reseed humanity, right? So there's a lot of mystery and mystification that's gone on with this whole story, and that's what I've been uncovering, unveiling, you know, along with really helping people to get clear that Mother Mary can be your personal mother. This is what I needed her for and still do at times, as well as a spiritual awakener. So there's many levels and layers to this Mary and to all of these beings who have come in divinely, because Mother Mary came in divinely. She was parthenogenetically born of her mother Anne. That's what I talk about in the mystery tradition of miraculous conception. She was already that avatar who then gave birth to an avatar, parthenogenetically. This was a family lineage and a family plan.
Very interesting. Yeah, and so when you say that about these children often dying young or experiencing a lot of difficulties, it again brings my mind back to, is the Gnostic worldview correct? And are there these forces that are trying to keep these things out? Like, are there these nefarious, malicious forces that are trying to keep these things out? Which I just find an interesting
yes, I
question.
do. I believe that.
Oh, you do believe that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I teach quite a lot about it. And I teach quite a lot about, well, what are the remedies? And one of the major remedies is working with the Sophia Christos family, not in that dogmatic way, but in the esoteric way. What were they really about? And for this, you can start looking into the Gnostic material. And I have taught about this quite a bit over the last year. What's in that Gnostic material? What does it tell us about these negative forces? How these were primarily a sexualized attack on humanity, among other things, and how Jesus and Mary and Magdalene and the whole Holy Family came in just at that time in the Roman Empire when things were totally ratcheting up with these forces. And they weren't able to totally eradicate it, but they were at least able to spread some esoteric suggestions into the populace that, of course, were then hijacked by these very forces, turned into dogma and control mechanisms and killing machine mechanisms, et cetera, because we're in duality, you see. So they knew they were taking a risk coming in. They were hoping against hope that something like the crucifixion wouldn't have to happen. But, he got snuffed out initially. But here's the thing, and I talk about this in the book, what Sri Kaleshwar tells us, that Mother Mary resurrected Jesus. Right. Through her own processes and practices, like the Pietà. He's on her, his broken body is on her lap, and the two of them knew all of these yogas, Atma Khandana Yoga, Parakaya Pravesh, and that's what they were doing to recycle him back to life. And, he really holds a timeline that Jesus then went to India, and it's controversial even in the Islamic tradition, whether he died or he didn't die. And even if you really read the Christian sources, you're like, wait a minute, he appeared to Thomas, he appeared to the apostle. Was he in spirit? Was he actually walking around? Like, I started looking at this in a whole different way. Right. So there's numbers of different timelines of what happened here. Was his ascension purely spiritual into the other plane? Or was it a total Lazarus resurrection of his body? Because they both knew how to resurrect the dead. And then he went off to India. And I feel like it's okay to hold whatever feels true for you about that, because there's medicine for you in it. So we're not going to get into arguments, about it.
Mhm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little like Rudolf Steiner when he talks about the significance of the entire Jesus event and in how it awakens something in the human consciousness
Yeah.
and was and our conscience and was kind of this like moment to break through these archonic forces that had
Yeah.
been arising to suffocate everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. And so you talk about the Infancy Gospel of James, which I never heard of it before, and I read about this stuff all the time, so I love when I find something new. I was like, oh, cool. And I didn't even know there was like a whole genre of infancy gospels. Really interesting stuff. But you rely on it pretty heavily for the book, or you refer to it, I should say, pretty often in the book. And so I'm curious, is your appreciation for the gospel, is it primarily, because I looked up, there's all these academic debates. It's been people have poo-pooed it, other people love
Yeah.
it. Is your appreciation of it primarily academic or like personal revelatory?
Both. Everything I do and write about is that. From when I went into grad school, it's why I chose California Institute of Integral Studies, so I could do that, have that experience, and apply my intuition as well as my intellect to these readings. Yeah, the Infancy Gospel of James. I feel that it's a real legitimate document. I don't find the arguments against it academically very persuasive, but the reason is because when I peered into it, and that is the whole, basically, the mystery tradition of miraculous conception is a very readable illumination of what that gospel is, adding things from what I learned from about the divine birth tradition from ancient Greece. When I read the gospel, having done all the research with cartloads of books about priestesses in ancient Greece and all this legendary and historical stuff, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's that. So that was the validation for me, understanding every single word and line and symbol in its fully fleshed out form, right? So I was given the gift of being able to look at that gospel and bring it forth for all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I am just so grateful that it remained. Who knows how many other kinds of writings did not remain,
Right.
or burned and so forth. But at least we have these shards, these threads, so that we can open our own Akashic records in a focused way without being like completely willy-nilly about what was going on. I do find some value in these texts as like just grounding markers.
Right. No, yeah, it's fast. I read from what I could find of it, but I'm really looking forward to reading it in its entirety. It's not actually part of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic Library. I'm saying this for the benefit of the viewers. I know you know this. It's not officially, or it's not part of that historical collection of documents, but it feels very much similar to me. It was like a different narrative that got cut out from the
That's right.
people who got to decide what stayed in the Bible. Um,
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing, Jeff, is that at the end of that, James, who's the writer of it, who basically is one of the sons of Joseph by a woman before he was given guardianship over Mother Mary, never a marriage, by the way. James is the writer, and he said that he had to go into hiding
Really?
to write it. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a very unsafe time.
So they were already
Under
asserting this control mechanism, like
Oh
even
yeah.
yeah.
Well, look at what happened with Jesus when the Caesar got wind of that Jesus was divinely born, and John the Baptist too. There was a hunt to kill all those children. I mean,
Right.
snuffing out. It was started right there. They had to go on the run. Mother Mary had to give birth in a cave in Egypt, essentially, or wherever it was. It was more like the Middle East area. But it's like, no, these people were already under attack. And then you see, I talk in the previous book about how Mother Mary was under attack, even when she became pregnant, and people were like, who did you sleep with? And this and that. And, then of course, the crucifixion was a whole big attack.
Right. And then the Gnostics
Attack.
themselves. I mean, look what happened to the Gnostics.
Yeah, and the Cathars, I mean, they are the continuation of that. They were eradicated. I mean, horrible holocausts.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It's this the whole like all these egregores fighting it out for their
All these egregores, all these egregores, and this lives with us day in and day out, which is why I feel that Mother Mary is a very good resource for us. And the essential Jesus, right? The real Jesus, the real Mary Magdalene, the real Grandmother Anne, the real John the Baptist, the real his mother Elizabeth. All of these people are important souls that we can access to help us at this time.
Right. Yeah, man, it is an interesting time. There's just a lot going on. There's like one pull for back to like traditional views of religion, but then there's this opposing view that is pulling us in this other direction. But it's interesting that you mentioned satanic earlier because could you just how do you perceive like satanic energy within your
Right.
paradigm of
Well,
reality?
it's how it's described in the Gnostic sources, and it's
Mm,
how it's described by many oracles today. These are interdimensional beings that are not of love, light, and wisdom. They are of another order. They're in the negative polarity of the duality. How they came is, I understand it, through the fall of the angelics, who decided to use their free will to create things that were outside the bounds of love, light, and wisdom because they could.
mm,
So they created a whole cascade of beings that were negative and almost anti the whole universal structure, anti the mother, which we hear in all these stories of the rape of the feminine and the rape of the goddess and all da 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 da. Okay, the disappearance of the goddess. So then these beings start having their own very big life, and they start developing and having their colonies, and it's happening at multiple dimensions of reality. I mean, it boggles the mind.
mm-hmm.
And then they're getting involved in physical universal, they're working through multiple dimensions. They're getting involved in physical dimensions like the third dimension. Somebody, Lisa Renee, is a really great resource for discussing this. There are other oracles today who I really respect. And so then we have this imposter race of these negative forces that posit themselves as God and are really attempting, they've gotten wind of the earth plane. They're really trying to get the earth plane for themselves. They're really trying to get humanity for themselves and harvest our energies and all of this. And there are multiple negative agendas going on. And this is why we have so much misery and trauma on the planet. It's not because, oh, that's just life. No, it isn't.
Right.
That's the important thing to realize. No. And just even being told that is a program. So we're starting to realize, oh my gosh, there's way more going on. Some of it is horribly negative, which we would call satanic or whatever. And some of it is very, very positive, which we might call our star being allies and our masters, like the Sophia Christos family. But this is what's going on and duking it out. And it has very real effects in our lives from millennia, generation after generation after generation. This repeating trauma, repeating sexual trauma, things getting worse and worse and worse. We feel like the whole earth is going to go down, right? All of this is like the ratcheting up of these negative forces, things that happened over the last 4 years. And we all have to take a breath and access our own inner divine.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where having these beings as helpers can be very helpful. And this is not about come to Jesus. It's like, look, if Vishnu works for you, if Shiva works for you, if Kali works for you, if Isis works for you, if, right, get the medicine from those great masters and netters, because it's all the same. Ultimately, it all comes down to the same stream. Be discerning, know when you're working of love, light, and wisdom, when you're not, when you're getting hoodwinked, and do your personal healing. That's the number one thing that needs to happen to get out of, to unhook.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm so adamant about Mother Mary, because she's a very tremendous resource. All of this colonization that they've done and missionary work to actually control people can be used as a mechanism to liberate people if people can get with the actual esoteric energies of these forces that have been injected into their cultures.
Mm. Yeah, it's very interesting because I think a lot of what's happening is people on some level, people like me, we've been swimming in this stuff forever, but
Right.
other people, there's something's not right. But the thing is, the modern churches have largely, and I'm happy to debate, to discuss with anybody. Like I have friends who are mainstream Christians, Muslims, whatever. However, it seems to me like, especially the Christian church, it's almost like it's materialistic, like a scientific materialism. It's a weird thing because it talks about God and yet acts as though these various forces aren't really at play. Like
Exactly.
maybe someday you'll see them when you die, but
Well,
other than that, you're just kind of here.
it's the biggest cognitive dissonance you could have, relying on the fact that this religion is based on divine birth and mystical behaviors of beings, and yet kind of denying the whole magical realm,
Right.
while then doing their own negative magic behind the scenes, according to whistleblowers and such and so on.
Right.
Okay, so there's like hoodwinked beyond hoodwinked, and we just have to look at, well, where am I being controlled? How is that doctrine really helping me, or is it controlling me? Where did that doctrine come from? Usually it'll be like a council of people wearing red outfits from the 400s,
Mm-hmm.
who were not friendly to humanity and certainly not friendly to women. Okay, so there's a lot of history that we don't understand that's going into sitting in a pew and hearing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and man, I could talk to you about this all day, but time's coming up, and so before I ask you practical question about your works and materials that you have out there, one other thing in the book. So Kaleshwar, is that how I say it? Kaleshwar?
Yeah, Kaleshwar or Kaleshwar, I've heard it pronounced both ways.
That's another. In addition to the Infancy Gospel of James, you refer to him quite a bit. I assume it's a him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there's one part where you have a quote from him, and he talks about this divine feminine force, and he mentions in it that it's he compares it to nature, and it can be kind of unpredictable and kind of he mentions specifically anger in there, and so while I thought about it, like how do you mitigate? Because I admire number one that it's very clear because nothing in life is perfect. It's very clear saying, hey, there's kind of a volcanic energy to this thing. And I admire that because people need to be aware of these things. Like people are starting to explore and starting to branch out, and there's too many areas where people are encouraging people to do what I think are very unsafe things for their own mental sanity. But so while you're working with the Mother and Mary energy, how do you mitigate this like kind of volcanic aspect of it?
Well, what you do is you keep doing the inner processes to unify the dark and the light within you.
Okay.
To unify the gender energies right? And this is through self-mastery, through healing, through emotional regulation, and then through engaging in arts like dance. Dance allows you to bring in both the light and the dark, the volcanic and the peaceful, and unify it into like a beautiful art form, you see? So there are methods of gaining sovereignty, gaining mastery, becoming the universal life force, that the yin yang, okay, the yin yang is not exploding out all over the place. The yin yang is the yin yang. Within it, it's roiling and this and that and the other, but it's a stable structure. That's what you want. That's what we're looking for. That's what all spiritual practices that everyone's engaging in are aiming for. Okay. And that's why the emotional healing is so important, because we are hooked and gotten off kilter and get into negative behaviors through our emotional unrest, our wounding. And that's how these forces keep it going. That's why emotional healing, catharsis of all the negativity that we've gone through, the grieving and self-love, inner love child. Some of these meditations at the end of the book are about that, like getting you into the state of self-love through the Marys. Very, very important. It is going to be an inside job. It's not going to be a political job. And it's not going to be an external, corporate job.
Mm-hmm.
It's internal. And we
Yeah,
have,
and you also
yeah,
be my turn to hold up the book. You mentioned in here specifically about the dangers that people can get into this, and it's really about their ego. And you specify that you have to stay on top of kind of your self-purification exercises to make sure that you're
yeah,
doing these things for the right reasons,
that's
and that
right.
you're not just like expressing your because if we get too tangled up in our ego, it's very, very easy to not see something that's destructive because it can act like something that's helpful. And we need
Absolutely.
to be able to discern those things. And so I
You have,
really like that you put that in there.
yeah, you have to become very adroit, very discerning every step of the way, and check yourself, and get some feedback, from others, because ego is really what we are calling ego is really the part of ourselves that wants to do well, but is vulnerable to other forces because of our inner wounding or our lack of understanding or whatever it is. Okay. So, um, yeah, I mean, this is a continual process, a continual small step process for all of us who want to be on this path.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
And
like, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
and we're being because of the pain level is going up. When the pain level goes up high, that's when you start seeking the healing. That happened with me. That was in the book, that I talk about that in the book. And it's happening individually. Like a lot of people are having breakdowns, breakups, break awakenings.
Right.
The whole collective seems to be going through this in such a weird way more than 10, 20, 30 years ago. My gosh. So pain can be an indicator that, okay, it's time for me to do this healing and this spiritual growth. What do I need to do? What are my resources?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. That's why a lot of people kind of shy away from what could loosely be called esoteric work, because it's all on you. It's like you have to be an adult. You seek help, you work with your compatriots or whatever, but it's fundamentally up to you. And there's another level of trickiness to it too when you start thinking about these thought forms that aren't actually your thoughts but look
That's
like your
right.
thoughts. And that's
That's
when it
right.
becomes really important to practice that discernment. But
Yeah.
so this has been fascinating. I love your book. I instantly want to read your previous books to get more background on it. So I really appreciate this discussion. I found the book very worthwhile, very interesting, and it sent me off into different ways of different directions of research. But our time is coming to an end, so I want to ask, in addition to this book, are there any other projects or just anything else you'd like to share with people?
Yes, thank you so much. And I really appreciate this discussion and the levels that you're bringing to it. It's very exciting for me when somebody such as yourself is getting engaged. And
Oh,
thank
cool.
you for this, for embracing the value of it, and sharing that with your listeners, your community. And yes, so I work from Seven Sisters Mystery School, which I founded in 2012. It's been going strong, and I have lots going on there. I recommend that you go to the website, Seven Sisters, Seven, and Sisters is with an S.
I
Seven.
will paste this in the description
Perfect.
box for the video, everybody, just so you know.
And you'll see what's going on. You can get on the email list. I have a weekly Sacred Sunday e-news. But the most important thing right now, through now and August 28th, is that I am offering a Mary and Magdalene priestess training,
Mm.
where we are putting the pedal to the metal. We are taking the concepts and the initiations that I either talk about or allude to in here, the book, but I extrapolate on this for how we're going to walk as Marys and Magdalens, what this means. Again, not in a dogmatic way where you have to go into the nunnery and put a veil on. No, being living embodiments of these energies for ourselves, for others. Okay, so it's very exciting. And I know that my publicist will give you the link for that, for people to take a look at that registration page. It's now through August 28th, and then the program is a 6-month training that goes through February 2025. And if you want to know a little bit more, I have a free call on August 6th about what is a Mary priestess, what's a Magdalene priestess, and is this a path for you? So that will also be in replay if you're watching this after that. And that will give you the whole picture of what this is all about. Is this a path for you? And there are many, many other ways that you can work with me. I have other courses about Mary Magdalene. I have a monthly Mary and Magdalene Empowerment Circle, which is a wonderful oasis for people. I work one-on-one. So yes, so seeing those links in the show notes would be great. And thank you so much.